Hey Zaka family! Zaka is launching an exclusive membership platform to provide you with career development workshops, coaching, community, and so much more. Go to ZakaConnect.com and sign up to receive information on how to access early registration and perks. Hello, everybody. This is Paul Herman, the Prince of Motivation and host of Zaka Presents My Journey. We're creating this vulnerable and positive platform where you can get inspired and motivated from different leaders from our community. Today, our guest is Simone Ince, who is Director, Marketing Insight and Thought and Leadership at Sun Life. Simone, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Paul. Excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you on the platform, to speak about your journey and all the things you got going on. I mean, you got a large title right there, so I'm going to have to dive into that a little bit later and talk about what it actually entails. But before we actually get into that, could you just tell us a little bit more about your cultural background and, where do you live right now currently?
So I live in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I was born and raised here. I moved away from university for a little bit. Had the opportunity to live in London, but currently back home residing in Toronto for the six.
And what's your nationality?
So I'm a first-generation Canadian. Both of my parents were born in Trinidad and Tobago. I'm the youngest of 6 siblings, and all 4 of the 5 of the older ones were all born in Trinidad also. So very interesting upbringing there.
Now, you said you were born in Trinidad?
I was born in Canada. So my older siblings, the majority of them were all born in Trinidad and Tobago. So they had the fortune of moving here as teenagers, having been born there, and growing up with that experience to Trinidad parents. So we've had very different upbringings, which has played a large role in my upbringing as a first-generation Canadian in a Trinidadian household as well.
Well, first I got to say Trini to the bone. That was always a big thing growing up. Everybody like, oh, Trini, you Trini to the bone. And I'm like, oh, wow, this is some serious stuff over here. To the bone,
it's
not even
all love and joy for Trinidadians, right?
Yes, no, I appreciate that. I'm Caribbean background myself, and that was always a big thing. Trinidadian people were like took a lot of pride. Could you talk a little bit more about the pride of being Trinidadian?
It's funny that you say that or that you ask that because my first experience being born in Canada, my first experience is I actually spent Christmas in Trinidad when I was around 8 years old. And that was the first time I went. I remember distinctly getting off the plane in that humidity, and I was ill for the first time. But then just hearing the soca and like Christmas in Trinidad is a big deal. We always had a big Christmas growing up in Canada, and baking and cooking and grating coconut for sweetbread the night before. Like you're doing all of the prep. Everyone's in the kitchen. Everyone comes by. There's meat and ham, and turkey was there because of the Canadian aspect, but really it was ham and beef and chicken and like it was just this joy around food and family and being together. And the food was there, but it was really just an accessory to an excuse for us all to be together and listen to parang and talk old stories and hear about old stories about my parents' time in Trinidad and even my siblings, what they remember from growing up in Trinidad, because they're 20 plus years older than me, so their experience is very different.
And what would you think is the big difference between when your siblings were growing up in Trinidad to growing up in Canada? Like, what was the main difference you think for the both of you guys?
I mean, my siblings grew up in a 1-room house in Maclean, Trinidad. So the 3 of them with my mother and my grandmother, and my mom moved to Puerto Rico and would send money home to them. So they grew up with sort of, my grandmother as a surrogate mom. They just had a different experience in terms of the way they had to take care of one another. And, they were poor. Like my parents grew up poor in Trinidad. My older siblings grew up poor, and we are proud of that because of how far we have all come, and the seeds that my grandmother and my mother have planted in us in terms of resilience and work ethic to get to where we are. And I see my nieces and nephews now because they're all adults and they're thriving, and I'm so proud of them. And that's just a couple generations down from my mother not having afforded the opportunity to even graduate I think she only got to grade 7 or grade 8, and then she was pulled out to care for her siblings because she was the girl, and that was her responsibility. And so she worked and worked and worked, and she was going back to university all the way up until, in her 70s, getting degrees, because she recognized the value of education. So growing up in Toronto, when she immigrated here, and my brother and I grew up in a wealthy, upper middle class, Upper Beaches neighborhood in the East End of Toronto, which was predominantly white. And so that's a very stark contrast to that one room home in MacBean, Trinidad, that my siblings grew up in.
Mm-hmm. Now, how is school for you growing up in a Trinidadian household?
In the house, it was Trinidad. We were, Caribbean, Trinidadian parents, Trinidadian rules. There was strictness, no outside clothes, no outside shoes. Like, there was respect. There was Trini food, so curry, taking doubles to school, not exactly the thing to get you to be popular in a predominantly white school, where myself and my brother were essentially the only Black children in the school. So it was very different. Like, there was a lot of trying to assimilate and not stand out and make myself just blend, right? So I get now that, oh, you can fit in anywhere. You're such a chameleon. You're so easygoing. And I think that's a byproduct of that, of not wanting to be othered. In any way that I could possibly control at that young age. And, looking back, I guess that was my first experience code switching, which has served me well in the back end in terms of being able to learn how to navigate white spaces at a very young age in terms of my career and my career progression. But it also meant that I, in essence, delayed becoming my full self, because I was trying to make myself small and not make myself threatening to those that thought my presence or my skin color or my intellect was a threat to them.
Mm-hmm. Could you talk a little bit more about how hard it is trying to assimilate into a new culture?
I can't fully speak to that because, again, I was born here but raised in a Trinidadian household, right? So I think somebody coming at different ages, right? Like, even my siblings might have had a harder time because they came as teenagers in high school. So coming from Trinidad to then going to high school in Toronto in the late 80s, that would have been quite the challenge for them. For myself, it was more around the cultural acceptances, and as a teenager wanting to be able to have the same freedoms and liberties as my friend, not understanding why I couldn't in certain instances, or why I was being treated differently, I thought, by my mother, who was really trying to protect me, knowing that I would not be treated the same as these other kids that I was, friends with at that age. And looking back now, I see there were, microaggressions, and in the height of 2020, after the killing of George Floyd, I had friends reach out to me from that period of my life being like, I'm sorry, I didn't realize I was doing this then because I didn't know better as a kid, and I'm doing the work now. But it's crazy that it's taken that many years, 20 plus years, to look back and realize what some of that was, and how it actually affected me to this day, and the work that I have to do to undo that socialization.
Okay. I like how you're breaking that down. Something I want to kind of know is that, were you influenced as a child to study something, directly, or did you know what you wanted to do when you got older?
Well, I wanted to be an actor and a writer. My mother was very much try everything. I was, did all the creative stuff, the arts camps, the music camps, always in theater. And I think mostly that meant that I was be busy, and so she would keep me out of trouble by letting me do all those activities. But that's it. Creativity was always something that I needed in my day to day, and I was discouraged from becoming an actor because my parents didn't think that would make any money, and so my mother wanted me to be a lawyer because I argued and negotiated all throughout my childhood until this day, and my dad expected me to be an astronaut, God rest his soul. So,
oh wow, an astronaut. Well,
he was
that's two extremes: a lawyer and an astronaut. Someone who sits down in a courtroom and someone who's flying out into space.
Yeah, so but in a way, I feel like I'm combining elements of all of them now in my career, or working on it. So a little bit of stardust and reaching for the stars right now, as well as acting, writing, film, and I'm pursuing a master's in dispute resolution. So I get to combine all the best of all of those things now.
Mm. Now, what is like one of the most memorable moments that has shaped your life to what it is today?
That would probably be in 2017. I've lost two nephews, but that was the first one. I lost a nephew. Thank you. That passed suddenly in 2017 from health complications. He was a sickle cell warrior, and what would have been his 24th birthday. And for some reason, that just it. I mean, I know a lot of the reasons. It was his age. I felt like God had betrayed my family. I'd lost my dad in 2012 suddenly, and I hadn't really processed that grief either. And I was at work. I was in a place where I was just exhausted. There were politics happening. There was blatant racism happening towards me from my direct manager at the time. And I was just done in so many levels, and I walked away from my faith. And so that actually shook me to the point of resigning from work in March 2017. And that resignation actually changed the trajectory of my career and how I got into film and television work, and how I'm back where I am right now at the company.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now I see you've studied criminology and like corporate relations, and you said you had a master's in law and dispute. So shout out to mom for noticing that, right? But like when it comes down to it all, like all this studying, like how did you manage all of that?
Still managing. It's still a work in progress. So I'm actually finishing up my master's of law in dispute resolution. But I think the studying is a balance of timing and alignment. And I didn't intend to go to corporate communications, to get a postgraduate degree in that. That was actually me trying to avoid becoming an adult in the regular workforce, or going to do a master's of political science on my way to law school, because I realized after graduating from my undergrad that I didn't actually want to go to law school. I wanted to go to law school to please my family, and the expectation that I should go to law school, because that's kind of what I set out to do with this criminology degree, because I was still in a people pleasing phase. And so that detour to get a postgrad in corporate communications led me to move to UK. I met some of my most dearest friends, but I also realized that what I actually really loved about the law was the resolution that it could provide in very specific senses, and that I didn't actually want to practice courtroom law. Like I didn't want to be a prosecutor or defense attorney or a corporate lawyer. I wanted to help people get to the root of their problems and resolve it. And so that mediation, negotiation, and conflict resolution is what I love most. And that's rooted in communication, which is what I do now for my day job, and storytelling, really, which is what I use data to do in my day job. So really trying to combine all of those elements of, the various sort of, this is one career path and people don't see the connection between them, but it over time has just become so clear to me how they work together.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I get you. So when it's all said and done, like what are some of the jobs and obstacles that you faced before you realized like what you wanted to do?
I would probably say, well, as I just mentioned, lawyering, it was not for me. It was for other people. And so realizing doing something just because you can and because you're good at it doesn't mean that you should do it. Learning that public relations also wasn't for me. I just, I didn't like the aspect of always having to like pitch, and it felt too salesy for me. And that's just a personal preference. And I would say navigating the nuances and like the politics of, I've mostly worked for financial institutions, global financial institutions, predominantly white spaces with a lot of white men that, those organizations were built by them and for them. And so learning how to navigate in those spaces as a Black woman it was a challenge, and it's still an ongoing journey, we'll say.
And then I could just say, when you said navigating, you mentioned something about when your brother and you were in school about, being the only black people, and you mentioned that, just being an African American woman, you know, it seems like it's been in something consistent within your life. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think that's part of it is the career, I guess the path that I've chosen. But also I have I don't know. That's a really hard question to answer, actually. Like, I've never looked at it and been like, but you're right. In my personal life, I have a lot more balance, and then in these sort of very career pursuits, I've worked in these spaces, and I think that's what has motivated me to, in my personal like entrepreneurial spirit, with my film company and even the consultancy that I ran for a few years with my business partner, like cater to Black and Indigenous and populations that are typically underrepresented in all of these spaces and don't have the support or access to you know organizational resources. And so some of the work that I've done within these organizations is creating those ladders. Most recently I created another opportunity for a student internship for under like a scholarship program specifically for Black and Indigenous students, because I was like, I interviewed these two candidates. I was like, they're both great. We only have one role, but I'm like, we can find the money for another role. And it's seeing those opportunities and opening doors for other people to create that access, so they don't have to be the only person in spaces, and they don't have to fight to feel valued and heard and included in those spaces, because we've changed the culture and we've educated, worked to educate the culture within these corporate spaces to be better.
Now, how do you handle the balance of doing what you're good at and you're passionate about? Like, how do you balance all that?
You got doing what I'm good at pays the bills. Doing what I'm passionate about.
Preach! You better preach now. Come on now.
Is building towards a place of freedom, I think, and I think that's passionate is currently the longer game. And a lot of people will say, well, if you believe in yourself, you'll just take that leap of faith. And I think there's context that's needed there, because everyone's like, well, if you hate your job, just quit. And I don't currently hate my job, so I'm not in the position where I feel like I need to quit. I'm fortunate. I'm in a good place right now. But there's also the reality of bills and, current economy and family obligations. And so not everyone has the freedom to just quit their job and follow their passion in that sense. And so I think building passion over time and investing that and setting healthy boundaries with my 9 to 5 so that I can pursue my 5 to 9 is what's gonna get me to a place of, just healthy balance and freedom, to be adding value and being of service, I think, to the world, to my community, to my family and friends with the work that I do, and have a real passion and burning desire for, hopefully aligned to purpose. That's the ultimate goal.
Now, I know you have tons of experience working in corporate settings. Like, what was the toughest obstacle you faced, like, in that career? Like, how did you handle it?
Bad people managers. Bad people managers are probably the most challenging thing to overcome, I would say, in a work setting, because you have to deal with them. And I've had untrustworthy direct managers in the past, like literally lie on performance reviews because they thought I wouldn't see their comments. And I had the good fortune of another, leader being an advocate and an ally, and seeing that they were lying and correcting it and calling them out on it. And I've had other managers just flat out ignore me. Like it became a game within the team to see how many days they would go without acknowledging that I was there and like that I existed. And for no reason other than, unexplainable in some. I know one was blatantly racist towards me, and that's the one I mentioned earlier, which was part of the reason why I left my job in 2017, because I didn't think it was worth the fight in that instance to stay, because I had other things that I was dealing with personally. but yeah, bad managers are, right now everyone knows the great resignation that's happening, and the difference between, someone staying and resigning is salary, but also the way that they are valued and treated by the organization, but more importantly by their direct manager. And so that's really helped me to be hopefully a good people leader, because I've had some really terrible experiences. So that's, you learn from the good and the bad.
Gotcha. Okay. Now I know earlier in our conversation I spoke to you. Well, I introduced you onto the platform, and I just kind of want to go back to that title that you got going on over there.
Yeah, it's a mouthful.
You got a whole lot going on over there. But could you tell us a little bit more about your role at Sun Life, and what are you guys doing over there as a company?
Sure. So, Director of Market Insights and Thought Leadership. Fancy title. What does it mean? So, Sun Life, where I work, it's a Canadian insurance company historically. Over 150 years old, but now it's a global organization offering, insurance, health, and wealth solutions for individuals and their families, but also in a group space. So, if you're an employer and you want to offer a health plan or insurance plan, or retirement savings plan to your employees, Sun Life offers that. And I work on the group side of the business, so working with employers, offering their employees retirement savings and like savings vehicle options. And my role specifically supports the thought leadership aspect. So creation of content that really establishes us as experts in the field using our, over 150 years of experience, but also our vast database of analytics and data that tells us how well, like the holistic wellness and financial health of members. And so, we create research reports. Hopefully in the future, I'm really looking at driving a DE&I research report around the state of, Black wealth in Canada, Indigenous wealth in Canada, and, what we can do to close the gap there. But really just creating content that, solves problems, provides thought-provoking solutions for, futurist thinking of what retirement and, our financial systems might look like. And hope, injecting it all with an intersectional lens of equity and inclusion, because again, you need those diverse perspectives.
That is true. That is definitely true. I want to kind of go back to something you talked about. You talked about the bad management, right? Bad direct managers. This made me think about it a little bit more. When you spoke about that, like, in your opinion, what do you think is like the most important quality as a manager to have managing minorities colleagues?
I think the most important quality for anyone to have as a manager, managing anyone, is seeking understanding and not making assumptions, and not assuming that the way you want to be led is the way that they want to be led, and recognizing that everyone is going to be different, but then also understanding that I don't like I try to stay away from the term minorities. I'm like, we're only minorities in these very specific spaces, but as a global population, we're not a minority. So, steering away from the idea that, one, making assumptions about the fact that, are we a diversity hire, or that we're not intelligent or we're not as educated, but then also not being threatened when we are smart and when we are successful, and listening and valuing us. So I think people need to learn to manage people that don't look like themselves, and that will open up a door of opportunity to learn, because we all have work to do. It's just we're all at different spaces on the spectrum. And yeah, so seeking understanding, I think, is the foundation for everything. Is just asking why and trying to understand and be empathetic to maybe what an employee is going through. I know myself, having previous managers that have literally lied and have been caught in those lies about me, that has made me untrustworthy of managers until we establish a relationship of trust. And it might not be fair to new managers, but that is a protection that I need to keep for myself as somebody that is trying to progress in my career. I can't just automatically assume that they have my best interest in mind, because that's not always the case.
Mm-hmm. Well said right there. I think the next area I want to kind of go into is just like, from your experience and like your perspective, like what do you think is like the biggest challenge, a Black woman faces working in like a major corporation?
My friend has I don't know who he gets it from, but he's always like, cut the check. No, being recognized and
Let's
promoted and based on value add, right? I think Black women add so much to organizations, and we call them like the big C and the little C, like the big contributions or the little contributions. And we have to value the sum total of those little contributions in it just as much as we value those big C's, the big contributions. And then, that's also rooted in being believed, right? Like being heard, seen, and believed. And so when we say something, recognizing that we said it and it is worthy of, either exploration or consideration, by nature of the fact that we're at the table, which means we have every right to be here, and we are experienced and skilled and intelligent enough to be here. And then I would say, the other challenge is the freedom to show up as our whole selves at work without being policed. Hair, body tone, facial expression, etc. But that's probably it. Everyone's saying, create a seat, open the seat, but we need to be there for us to be able to create seats for other people. And we're creating tables of our own in organizations, but within certain institutions and hierarchies, we really need to be recognized and promoted in order for there to be equity that rolls down the hill, and creating more opportunity for other people that look like us.
I'm gonna still stick to that line to cut the check.
Yeah.
Cut the check. That's got to be like a new like logo or something for somebody, a T-shirt. You start walking the street, you get employed the first day you come in, the shirt is on, cut the check.
Right. And I mean, I think this Great Resignation has really sparked this. The Great Resignation the past 2 years, just the state of the world, really, when we look at it over the past, couple of years, has lit this fire under, I would say a large group of women in general, but especially Black women, LGBTQ women, within the workplace, to demand better, to demand, if you don't value me, you don't value my contributions, and you don't see me, I will go elsewhere where they will. And, I think it was McKinsey and Lean In just published a study that women leaders, senior women leaders, are leaving, for every one director, I think, that joins an organization, 2 leave, which is a staggering stat. Like, especially considering many of these organizations have these DE&I targets, to hit parity or achieve, X% of Black employees by this year, but you're losing them faster than you can attract them, which tells me there is a problem. So the performance of just hiring diverse talent isn't enough. You need to, invest in changing the culture within the organization. And that responsibility cannot rest solely on the backs of your diverse employees, which, oftentimes it does, is off the side of the work, sort of volunteer, resource group type work.
Okay, I get you on that. A lot of us who are children of immigrants, we always rely on like side hustle, right? That's always a common name. I mean, a word, a side hustle. What advice would you give to someone who wants to pursue their dreams while also working for corporate?
I think getting clear on the vision, but also just starting. And I think that was the biggest challenge for me, was not feeling like I had the time, not feeling like I had the resources, not feeling like I knew enough to start, doing what I wanted to do with film and television. And I mean, I did it pretty drastically in that I took a year off work and decided to resign from my role to do whatever I wanted. And then a year later, I ended up, co-founding a film and television company, which was not the plan at all. But that was that was my leap of faith year. And I think everyone just needs to make a plan and, you know, small consistency, you know, an hour a day, 2 hours a day at working at whatever it is will add up to more than you think in a shorter amount of time than you think. So I think that is the biggest thing is, you know, setting healthy boundaries for your work and then having a clear understanding of the focus and the consistency that it would take to get a, you know, side hustle, side project, side passion project, whatever it is you want to call it, going.
You know, hustle is a big thing, you know, especially coming from like an immigrant family. They're like, all right, this is the land of opportunity. You gotta go for it, right? You gotta push, you gotta, you know, create opportunities for yourself. And I can just imagine, you know, being pushed in different directions. I know you said mom was saying be a lawyer, dad was be an astronaut. You're sitting here saying I want to be an actor, and it's just a lot going on, you know, to juggle at that point in time. Did you ever have like a mentor during this time to kind of help you like coach and get you on the right path?
I don't know that I've had one mentor. I've had I guess I've had, you know, managers that have turned into sort of, I guess, would say advocates or sponsors or, you know, sounding boards, and really close friends that I would call upon. But that's something that I'm also learning is that, you know, byproduct of being the child that just wanted to people please and, you know, straight A student and didn't ever ask for help and, you know, didn't know how to be vulnerable because didn't think it was safe to be vulnerable. You know, I grew up not wanting to reach out and admit that I needed help. And it wasn't probably until 2018 I had a pretty severe back injury, which ended up, you know, impacting the way that I process things and actually had to take a break from my master's program because my brain just wasn't functioning. I wasn't forming sentences. Wow. And as a communicator and a marketer, that was a big, you know, I've always been a talker. I can talk, I can write, I can communicate in full sentences, and not being able to do that for about a year was the point, probably one of the lowest points and hardest, you know, years of my life, but also the point where I realized that it was okay to ask for help. And my friends had to really tell me that it was okay. And I'm so grateful for, you know, chosen family, what I call them, are the friends that are basically family, but we don't share blood, because they are the ones that created that safe space for me to be able to do that work, to, you know, understand that hustling is okay, but it's okay to rest. It's okay to heal. It's okay to focus on your health and not try to be of service to everyone else at the same time when you're not, you know, filling your own cup. And I think doing the work of understanding yourself, loving yourself, accepting yourself, treating yourself well is the most benefit that you can give to anybody else, because a byproduct of that is you are trying to be you know, the best version of yourself you can be. You will be a better version of yourself for everyone around you. So that hustle it requires balance. It requires focus and hard work, but it also requires understanding that you're going to have to rest. You're going to have to take a break. You're also going to have to learn how to celebrate your wins along the way to keep going, because that's also a hard lesson, right? We just want to, oh, this is done, and we move on, and we don't think about the work that went into that. And, you know, it's okay to, it's not, you know, egotistical or bragging to just be like, yeah, I did that, right? Like, we need to big ourselves up and learn to affirm ourselves so that we don't feel unwhole or lacking or in need of it from others in order to get where we want to go. So that's, you know, a work in progress as well.
Okay. I like the way you're breaking that down right there. You dropping some gems. You dropping some gems on this platform. Listeners, I hope y'all picking it up. Now, a lot of us are taught, like how you were saying before, a lot of us are taught to be polite and respectful. And you talked about management and how, you know, sometimes poor management could be, but, you know, those types of qualities that you were taught as a young child growing up, sometimes colleagues or management, in a sense, could take advantage of those things. Like, how do you deal with that?
It's hard. It's hard. You know, when I rejoined corporate in late 2020, it was probably the hardest onboarding experience I've had ever. And that was because I was returning to a company where I had a reputation of being a high performer. I had existing relationships, and it was almost like onboarding virtually into a new role that didn't have a roadmap, and had sort of interim leadership, so not really any support. But the expectation was, hit the ground running and within 30 days be delivering and be who I was before when I was at the organization for 5 years. And that's an unreasonable expectation to place on anyone. But because I was a people pleaser and because I was like, oh, this is a great opportunity for me to get back into the works, corporate after 3 years in a role that, I truly wanted to be in, I didn't push back because I didn't want to ruffle any feathers because, people please. You just do the work, get it done, do it well, and then they'll recognize you on what you do, even if the expectations are unrealistic because there's some sort of, superhero gene that you think you can just do it. If it's asked of you, it must be reasonable that someone can do it. They must think someone can do it, so I'll do it.
True.
But it's in oftentimes, I think there's like the glass cliff that Black women get placed on, right? That we get brought in to clean up. And that was kind of the case, in this role that I'm in right now. There was somebody there for a very short amount of time and didn't go do anything with it, because it was chaos. It was a bit of a circus. And so got brought in to come in and just, in a virtual world, excel immediately was the expectation with no support, little to no support, and like no resources. And that unreasonable expectation is where I set my bar rather than, doing an assessment. And that's something I learned to say, this is unreasonable, and push back and say, this expectation that you've placed on me is unreasonable. Here's what a reasonable expectation looks like, and this is why. And I've now gotten to a place where I do that on a regular basis and saying, this is unreasonable, like what you're asking of me, and this is why. And making it very plain to say, proposing solutions. I'm always all about solutions, but we have to call it out, because if you don't call it out, then it's just, continuing to be the workhorse without the recognition and without the acknowledgement of how much work you are actually doing and the type of value that you're adding.
Mm-hmm. Now, with all of that going on in your life, all the things you've done and accomplished, the hours and time you spent in your career, like, what is one of the most proudest moments in your career that you learned a lot from?
It's a hard one. I think because I've dabbled in so many different areas. There are different ones. True. I would say within television film, it's easy. I had a film that the first feature film that I was an executive producer, assistant director on, first feature length film I've ever produced. Premiered at TIFF in September. And so that is probably, to date, one of the proudest moments, or achievements, I would say, in that pursuit of film and television. For my corporate, I think it's really the people that I have led coming back to me, telling me, years after I was their manager, I like to say coach or people manager or people leader, that they are still using some of the things that they learned from me in their job, and they are now passing them on to their team. Mm-hmm. To me, that's important. That is important. That tells me that I'm doing something right, and I'm impacting, like I'm coaching in a way that is impacting not just the people that directly, but report to me, but, there's a ripple effect that they are taking some of that with them. And, knowing the importance of good people leaders, hopefully that means that we're passing on good traits, and, good skills to future people leaders, and employees to be open and enthusiastic and supportive and gracious leaders, that, can acknowledge wrongs and support their employees in the way that they need.
Well, that goes to show how good of a leader you are. When people come back and say thank you, people could say thank you at the present moment when it affects them at that present moment. Oh, thank you so much. Great job. But then when 6 months down the line, when people come back knocking on your door, I just want to say thank you. And you're like, what? Thank you. I haven't seen you in like 6 months, so I haven't worked with you in a while. No, I just want to say thank you, because the transferable skills that you gave them, or even, influenced them to kind of like push more than what they were doing currently, has impacted their lives in a way that, it's priceless.
Right.
So it's a blessing.
It's, to me, it's funny too, because it's never anything that you think it's going to be, right? It's always these little things where, I think I used to one employee who, 4 years later, we were having a coffee chat catch up, and she was like, I still tell my team all these things, and one of the examples was just something so simple about, don't stress about it. It will be here tomorrow. And she's like, you never made me feel bad if something was late or got pushed, whether it was in my control or not. She was just like, you were always understanding and always made me understand the importance of balance in my life, and that work was always going to be work, and it would be there. And we weren't, we're not brain surgeons. Not to say that what we do isn't important, but it's not a matter of life and death if something doesn't get done by 5 p.m. end of day and it goes over to the next day. And she's just like, even little things, just like going home early on a Friday, because, I had a late date another day. But she's like, it just meant that you saw me, you saw the work that I was doing in the little ways and the big ways. And I think those little things, again, all the little things add up to big things that really make the difference.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, Simone, you've been slaying away this interview, and I really,
you make it easy.
I mean, we're just having a conversation, and I want to ask you this last question. I just really want to know, what advice would you give to like a young kid, who wants to follow in your career path? Like, what would you give to them and say, hey, look, if there's anything I could pass to you right now, that transferable skill or that information that is going to help scale you in your business in corporate America, what would it be?
I would say, one, don't follow my career path. No, truly, because
that's the first. Go ahead.
That's the first, because you can't. I think when we try to follow other people, we try to do things in a way that they did, and we are uniquely ourselves. So we can't. Following my career path is not going to bring somebody the same results that I got, whether joy, like highs or lows. And so I think people need to find a career path and be okay with that career path changing, right? Like, I did not set out to be a director of market insights and thought leadership with my criminology background and, corporate communications post-secondary degree. This isn't where I plan to end up, but I'm happy I'm here. So I would say follow the desire and the passion that, that you think that for the vision that you have for your life, and work towards that. And try not to let fear override your faith in yourself. And, that's a lesson that I'm still working on again, is that, sometimes people think that you're scared of failure, but sometimes it's, fear of failure, but also fear of success and what that success brings with it, because it's not always all roses. So,
true.
Yeah, do the work to figure out your own path, and then follow that fearlessly.
That is true. That is true. Simone, I just want to thank you so much for being on the platform today, and really expressing and talking to us about your journey and the path you've taken. And I know you've taken several different paths, but all those paths obviously have led to the individual you are today. And I think that's a great thing. I know that like you said, you've kind of combined what mom and dad had kind of won out for you in your career right now. So kudos to you and congratulations on everything you've been doing. And I greatly appreciate you spending time with us and, dropping those gems.
Thank you, Paul. It's been an absolute pleasure. You make this fun and easy, and appreciate what you and Zaka are doing for the community, for the diaspora, for everyone, just working to make their ancestors proud and themselves proud. So appreciate you. These stories are necessary. The vulnerability is necessary. And happy to support and contribute in any small way that I can.
Thank you. Thank you. And I know the Zaka community greatly appreciates those words. And I just want to let the listeners know, if you want to hear more inspirational stories like Simone, please check us out on ZakaConnect.com. Follow our social at Zaka Connect, or follow our feed, Zaka, wherever you listen to your podcast.